This morning's speaker is world-class. He travels the world with the messages of ancient civilizations and future potentials for society. This is fascinating, this talk. I've heard some of it at Contact in the Desert. So let's give Michael Tellinger a big, big hand for being here. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see everybody's up and ready to start an exciting day. This is a longer presentation that I'm squeezing into an hour, so I'll start rapidly. That's what we're going to talk about, which is a lot, as you can see. We're going to get through it in an hour. These are the books that I've written. If you're not familiar with them, please make a mental note. When we finish here, go online and buy one. Otherwise, we know where you live. We know. So what I like to do, for those of you that may not be aware of it yet, is I like to connect the dots from the past to the present and try and figure out why the world is so messed up and what we can do about it. What we're not going to cover today is the Ubuntu and contributionism side because there's just not enough time. But I'm just going to take you through a bit of an introductory journey of discovery of the ancient civilizations of Southern Africa and the critical role they play in decoding pretty much all ancient civilizations around the world. It truly has been like a Pandora's box that has opened up for me about 11 years ago now, or maybe 12 years ago, and been able to, or has led me to a deeper comprehension of so many different things, and the interconnectedness of everything is really, for me personally, the incredible result of this discovery at the southern tip of Africa, a vanished civilization that we know nothing about. The fascinating thing, however, is that new discoveries are made every year, and these discoveries are just never stop coming. It's quite spectacular what's going on this planet of ours. And there seems to be no end to this. Just a few years ago, 2 years ago now, I think 60,000 structures discovered in Guatemala. And this new technology, or relatively new at this stage, this LiDAR technology that strips away the vegetation and allows the researchers to see what lies beneath the vegetation, has brought up so many different new discoveries that totally boggles the mind. Wherever you look in the world, no matter which part of the world you go to, there are ancient civilizations. It tells us that there's a huge hidden history that we know nothing about. I'm just going to show you a few of these mysterious kind of examples of some of these forgotten and lost sites around the world. Some of them are well known, some of them are not that well known. Here's a famous one in Turkey, Norsun Tepe in Turkey. Unfortunately, you can clearly see something very unusual is going on here. This is not something left behind by people that are wasting time. Unfortunately, this site is now underwater in Turkey. And this seems to be a plan of action around the world. I know that in Egypt, there was definitely an agenda to drown everything underwater. In where the Aswan Dam is today, there are thousands of ancient ruins underwater now. So if those that run the world today don't want us to see some of these sites, they build a dam and everything is drowned. You may not be aware that many of the major sites in Egypt are not actually the original sites. They were actually broken down and moved to new locations and reassembled. So be aware, if you go to Egypt, don't think that this is, make sure that you're looking at the original site and not a reconstruction of a place that was broken down like Lego blocks and re-erected somewhere else, because that is definitely part of the plan. Here are these weird towers in China, more than 800 towers built around China in a specific province. And no one seems to know where they come from, who built them, what the purpose was. And 800 of these towers that no one seems to know what's going on. These amazing structures in Africa, in Gambia, the Wasu stone circles, just a mysterious place, just once again showing the mysterious ancient origins in Africa that we know so little about, probably the least explored continent in the world. And I'll talk a lot more about that. This weird anomaly, the Baltic Sea anomaly, what the hell is this? It's under the water, it's under the sea. It really looks like some sort of a construction, or is it a crashed craft of some sort? Who knows? It seems to be like a landing, like a clearing strip onto the one side of it. Who knows what this is? Really, I'm just highlighting the mysteriousness of lost ancient civilizations. Pyramids are all over the world. They're everywhere. Don't think that there's a place in the world that does not have pyramids. They seem to be the thing that was happening in the past. Wherever you go in the world, there are pyramids, although they may not have been found in some places. Like this one here, the Garut Pyramid in Indonesia that was found several years ago now. And then the mysterious structures in the Near East and the Middle East that just boggle the mind. Once you start playing around on Google Earth, your eyes literally pop out of your head when you start seeing what's just lying there in the open for everyone to see in the deserts everywhere. Stone circles in Jordan, and these weird shapes that you find all over the world in the deserts. What's going on here? Who are these people that built these structures? When were they built? What were they built for? We don't really have answers for that, but they certainly attract our attention. Here's another weird one, these strange shapes all over Jordan and Syria and Saudi Arabia and Iran. The moment you start exploring Iran from the air, it will blow your mind. And then in the more built-up countries, in Ireland, right next to Newgrange, because of the droughts that hit Europe and the UK and Ireland in recent times, suddenly new ancient sites have shown themselves up. If you can see what I mean here. You can see it over there. Not a very clear picture, but it looks like a computer imprint into the field there. And then Roman ruins found in Wales, and then this mysterious structure that's really become quite a talking point in recent times, the Eye of the Sahara, or the Ricard structure in Mauritania. This is clearly something very special, and we can talk a lot more about this. It is becoming, in many people's research, it is becoming the #1 candidate for the lost city of Atlantis, if you're not aware of that. This is another view of it. It seems to fit exact dimensions of Plato's description of Atlantis when you start looking at it. I'm not going to go into the details. You can do this for yourself. It's not difficult to find it. But the Eye of the Sahara is a spectacular sight to just look at and try and imagine what was going on here. What's interesting is Herodotus, in about 450 BC, on his map, he places the Eye of the Sahara, or he places Atlantis right next to the Atlantis Mountains here. Atlantis Mountains are right there where the Eye of the Sahara just happens to be. And what you also notice is the River Nile. In old maps, keep in mind that the Sahara, as recently as 5,000 years ago, was a lush, giant jungle, right? A lot of people are not aware of this. This is, I guess, relatively new information that's come out. The biggest lake on Earth, Lake Chad, was located in the Sahara. It was as large as all the Great Lakes together combined. One lake in the Sahara. That's gone, obviously. But what's interesting is the River Nile actually runs all the way here from the Atlantis Mountains, or where the Ricard structure is in Mauritania today. Obviously, the map of Africa looks very different here than it does today. And the Nile runs all the way from there, down across Africa, and then joins up with where the River Nile begins today. Today, the Nile begins here, when on the old maps, it starts here and goes all the way down and joins the existing Nile up there. So there's so much more to this ancient stuff that's going on here that we need to just keep in mind. And this here, this PC board grid, when you start looking at Google Earth, you start to discover weird things again that starts to make you wonder, do we actually live in a simulated reality, virtual reality environment? Is this a game? Because this certainly looks like something very strange is going on. Can you see the PC board grid underneath? Underneath here? Let me zoom in for you. Can you see that? That's not a drawing. That's actually a feature in the earth. What's going on here? This looks like we're looking at a PC board. So what this does is these new discoveries really reveal a hidden history. And we know by now, I trust that all of us in this room are aware of the fact that our history is rewritten by the victors. None more so vigorously and astutely than very recent history. And unfortunately, you know that those who control the media pretty much control what we think and what we believe. And who controls the media? Who owns the media? We all know who owns the media, these guys here. And unfortunately, the rabbit hole never stops. So I'm just reminding you of some of these things, because sometimes we forget how the hierarchy works and who's really in control of what. And we talk about education. Yeah, we need to get more educated. Well, unfortunately, the education system has fallen prey and victim to the same people that control the media, the banksters, the royal banking bloodlines. And because they own all the research laboratories through the large corporations, and the research laboratories publish the textbooks that are given to the universities. And so if you don't regurgitate what's in the textbooks, you fail. You know, one great example of that is if you're studying physics and you are asked in a physics exam, what is the force that holds the nucleus of an atom together? And if you don't answer the strong force, you will fail. Well, by now you should know that that is all rubbish, that there is no nucleus of an atom the way we've been taught. And if I'm going too far for you now, please go and watch some of my lectures online to realize what's really going on here. How we've been lied to about everything. I'm talking about the science, the physics, space, about everything, especially our history. Because once we wake up, there's no holding us back. So it has come to the point right now that everything we've been taught is a lie. And I'm urging you to please accept this. Don't question this anymore. Just be okay with it, because then it's so much easier to find solutions to the problems. Because if we still believe that among this basket of rotten apples that we call our societal authorities, in this basket of rotten apples, if we still think that there's one okay apple in there, then we're missing the point. Because you can't have one source of truth in a basket of rotten apples. Otherwise, the whole chain of control falls apart. So everything we've been told is a lie, and it's perfectly structured and organized. Now that we've accepted that, it's so much easier to figure things out. And again, I say this with love in my heart, because we need to know what's going on. I'm not saying we need to focus on this and get lost in this and go down the rabbit hole and get depressed and suicidal. No, it's about having the knowledge and information upon which we can build a foundation for the future. We need to know what's going on. Otherwise, how do we know, if we don't know who we are, where we come from, how do we possibly know where we're going, right? This is a key thing here. So our history is definitely manipulated, and it seems that our recent history is being manipulated and recreated for us. It's changed and erased it seems to be happening on a very frequent basis. In fact, some of the research recently shows that every 200 or 300 years, there's like this complete clean sweep of what's going on, and replaced by false memories, disinformation, rewritten history books that are completely skewed to what we believe happened 100 years ago, which is completely nonsensical. I mean, if we believe that things are, let me just go back here, sorry. So is it our imagination or is it real? This is what some people have been really fascinated by recently, and it's become known as the Mandela effect, because we start to remember things differently. The whole Mandela effect. How many of you have heard of the Mandela effect? Okay, so this is a well-informed crowd, so I don't need to explain that to you. So clearly it seems that different people remember different events of recent past differently. And that's a big problem. That's a very big problem. I just had a Mandela effect recently, and I completely forgot what it was. It just blows my mind, you know. How can you forget? How can we forget? You know, right? Just the fact that we forget stuff. How is that possible that we forget something, right? This is a ridiculous idea. Because once you know something and you've seen something, you remember something, surely you should know it and remember it forever. Just the concept of forgetting something means that there's a program in there somewhere that is causing that for us, because we shouldn't forget anything, right? Anyway, I'm going off the point here. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that if our news is fake, imagine how wrong our history is. And that's really this point of departure here. And it goes back to the most recent event, World War II. Pretty much everything we've been told about World War II has been turned on its head. And this, as you may or may not know, has become a very sensitive subject of discussion. Or you can't talk about World War II because then you're either this or that, or you get labels and you become that. It's unbelievable that there's certain subjects we can't talk about. And you realize the moment that they put a restriction on us being able to discuss certain recent events, there's an agenda behind it. If people go to jail because they become Holocaust deniers, and a Holocaust denying is turned into a crime, you realize we have a problem, right? So deal with this information how you want. One of these people here is not what we were told. Please go away, do some research. And this brings us to the great human puzzle. Who are we, where do we come from, and why are we here? We all ask ourselves that. Unfortunately, the species with amnesia that we've become because of this constant rewriting of our history, to such an extent we got no bloody idea what's going on in the past. We don't even know what happened 60 years ago in the Second World War. How could we possibly imagine what went down 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago? It's just a complete nonsensical idea. So what we are told is that the ancients were primitive, and they looked something like this. And yet, it's these guys that we get told all the time, over and over, that they were very dumb, because we're the pinnacle of civilization, we know so much. And yet these guys went and did stuff like this, right? And then when they were finished with this, they built this, and notice the one common denominator here, that all these ancient sites are really grossly broken down. Just the energy required to break these structures down is an insane amount of energy and effort to break these ancient structures down. Then they went into the desert and they built a big statue of a dog with a human head. And they went into Baalbek and threw all these big blocks on top of each other. Why? Because they had nothing better to do. It took me a long time to figure out why these guys did it, and I just recently figured out how they could build these things up in Egypt. And remember, Egypt is in Africa. I come from Africa. It's a cool place to be. Sometimes people forget that Egypt is in Africa. Egypt, I'm going to Egypt. I've never been to Africa. Oh. I just realized recently why all these people in ancient times could do all this, and that's because they didn't have jobs. They had all this time on their hands. They would get up in the morning and say, well, I don't have a job, I don't have to earn any money. You see the irony in that, right? So they got together and built statues and temples and went up the mountain and did this kind of stuff, and they went into Siberia and went right up a mountain and carved a giant block. And then they got together and dug a hole in the ground and surrounded it by big stones. And then they started the alphabet. In the ancient times, H was the first letter of the alphabet. We don't realize that. Evidence is right there. How stupid can we be, right? And then they carved a whole city out of rock. And there are many of these. This is just one example of these people that didn't have jobs, didn't have any intelligence. The amazing stuff that they did. And then they built more pillars on platforms because they had all this time on their hands, and big giant blocks that they piled up on top of each other. And then, once they piled them all on top of each other and created this huge Lego block structure, they covered it all up in sand because they were tired of it. Apparently, that's what we are told. Said, no, we don't like this, let's hide it. And then they built this kind of thing, and because they had nothing better to do. And they did all of this with ropes, pulleys, hammers, and chisels. The special thing that you may have missed here is that all these places we just looked at, pretty much all of them are either in the northern hemisphere or along the equator. So until I started to talk about the vanished civilizations of South Africa and Southern Africa, very little was known about any ancient civilizations in the southern hemisphere. All of this is always in the bloody Northern Hemisphere, and I'm sick of it. We've been left out down in the South. So I went out and I built 10 million stone ruins in South Africa just to compete with the Northern Hemisphere. That's what some people claim on Facebook, that I'm lying. I went and did all this myself just to prove a point. Yes, I did. So the ancient ruins of Southern Africa are really telling us a very different tale of the ancient past. Welcome to my world, and I hope that sometime you'll be able to make it down there to join us on one of these special cruises, or special journeys of discovery and tours that we do. You don't have to come on one of my sacred sites tours, or the ones that I do with various people like Samus Managet. You can just book into our lodge and come and experience the stone ruins for yourself. And just to show you a little bit what it looks like from the air. So that's what we call the stone circles of South Africa. There's some still photographs here just to show you what they look like from the air. You'll notice each one is completely unique, and that was a huge discovery. Just that thought that each one is completely unique. No two stone circles are the same. That's a huge breakthrough, just that thought alone. And you've noticed from that video the channels, there's little they look like pathways that connect them together. They're not paths, they're channels that connect them. And it's just no stone circle stands alone. They're all part of a giant grid, all connected to each other. Beautiful flower shapes like this. And when you start seeing these flower shapes, you start to realize we're dealing with some very advanced technology. You can see the channels here that you saw in the video. And then all of this is held together in what's around it. It looks like a giant spider's web that goes around out of it. The terraces, the agricultural terraces, that literally looks like a giant spider's web. Channels. What you're looking at is the largest cluster of stone ruins found anywhere on Earth. Because the reason I can say this is because there are more than 10 million of these. More than 10 million of these squeezed together into South Africa, Zimbabwe, and there's probably more than 10 million. When you start doing the numbers, and I always remind people, don't just believe what I say. Go there and do the research for yourself. Do the numbers. So you go, oh my God, he was right. He's not just making it up. And that's what happens to people all the time. So, well, how do you get there? Well, I did the numbers. Oh, okay. Do the numbers yourself, and you'll be amazed what you find. And that's when you realize, oh my God, we're dealing with a civilization we know nothing about. They're gone. They just left this behind. This is why we know they were here, because this is there. It doesn't go away. And that's the exciting part. So what are the stone circles for? And that remains the really important question. And I must tell you that the answers to this are changing all the time. There's obviously not enough time to go into any of this detail, so I would recommend that at some stage you join one of my workshops and we'll work through all these interesting ideas, theories, and hypotheses that are getting more and more support and more evidence the more we delve into this and the more research we find. And little pieces of the puzzle that I may have found 12 years ago, suddenly I go, oh my God, I know where this fits, boom, and suddenly a whole new light comes on, you know, because you found the right socket for the plug. So what you see really very quickly, if you understand sound and cymatics and resonance, you realize that every stone circle is just a cymatic pattern. Every stone circle is the shape of the sound that comes out of the earth at that specific place. So it becomes an amplifier for the earth's natural frequencies. So we're dealing with a very powerful, the reason I know this is because we measured it. We measured very powerful sound frequencies and magnetic fields and electromagnetic waves coming out of these stone circles. And the thing is that they keep changing. Every time we find a new tool, a new device to measure it with, we measure different frequencies. So it means that these things are alive. They're still working. And they're very, very active. And Adam's calendar, this is an aerial view of Adam's calendar, is the most powerful of all of them. So when you get to the flower-shaped ruins like this, and you know anything about electronics or electrical engineering, you realize that we're dealing with magnetron technology. And this is a key dead giveaway, that this is very advanced ancient technology using sound and resonance. And what's interesting is that when we start reading the Sumerian texts about Enki and his activities in the Abzu mining gold, we read about the earth splitter. And I'm of the opinion now that these flower-shaped magnetron structures that we find, and there are thousands of them connected into this giant energy grid, that these are what Enki or what the Sumerian text might be referring to as the earth splitter device. So what we're looking at is a giant energy grid. Every stone circle generates huge amounts of energy, and it pushes it into the grid, the collective grid, through the channels that connect them all together. And what it was used for remains a very good question. Obviously, it was used for gold mining, and there is new evidence now that has surfaced. Once again, 12 years ago or 10 years ago, I was given some information about the stone circles showing under certain scanning technologies showing evidence of gold, and yet we have not found any evidence of gold inside the stone circles. What I'm sharing with you is brand new information that I've never shared before. This is the first time I'm talking about this. We now have new technology that can detect nanoparticles of gold and monoatomic gold structures within the stone circles. And this is a South African technology that was just developed, someone that works in the mining industry. What they found is that the mainstream mining companies do not have this technology. They cannot detect nanoparticles of gold and monoatomic forms of gold within the sand. This is huge. There are now large parts of South Africa and Southern Africa where there's trillions of dollars of gold just lying in the sand. You don't have to mine, you don't have to do anything, you just scoop it up and process it. But they don't even know that there's gold in the sand. So this is a huge breakthrough. And it seems to me now that the stone circles were actually used to somehow suck up the nanoparticles of gold or the monoatomic form of gold to the surface in the stone circles. And they were actually getting the gold from the stone circles themselves. This is the first time I've ever shared this information. And I can go into a lot more detail, but not in today's lecture. So we're dealing with gold. I also believe that this huge area of stone circles that generate all this energy was possibly used for manipulating the atmosphere and the climate, for actually possibly generating an atmosphere by putting oxygen into the air and making a habitable climate on Earth with an oxygen-rich atmosphere. And there are, again, reasons for that we don't have time to go into. But we're dealing with a huge machine, the largest machine ever constructed. If they think the Large Hadron Collider in CERN is big, forget about it. That's 17 miles. Here we're talking about 450,000 square kilometers of stone circles and terraces. This is a construction on a scale that we couldn't even fathom today because we don't have enough money. Now we realize that these guys didn't work with money. They're the ones that created money and gave it to us so they could control us. Isn't that a great plan? And it's worked out very well for them. But now we know what they've done and we know how to get out of it, right? And Travis spoke about it yesterday. So this is how everything is connected. And this is how the one small town will change the world came about. From learning about the ancient civilizations and how these bastards got the better of us and how we now know this and we can get out of it. It's a great story. And it's very simple. But you have to go through this process. And then we also learn about how this is all connected to quantum mechanics and quantum physics and what space is and what space is not and how we lie to about space and all this stuff. It's a great story. So the other great story is that about the healing aspect. So for 11 years now, I've been constantly told by people that come on tours with me and visit the stone circles that they've experienced some form of healing. And for many years, I've just ignored it until recently I realized, hold on, if the stone circles are amplifying the natural frequencies of the earth, and you walk into the stone circles or close to the stone circles, then obviously the trillions of cells in your body will be exposed to the natural frequencies of the earth, which is good for you. And that's what we should be vibrating with. We should be resonant with Mother Earth and the frequencies of the earth. Bingo, I think we got the very simple solution. The stone circles are natural healing devices given to us by Mother Earth. And this is why people have been cured of all kinds of diseases, including full-blown cancer. Stone circles are healing devices. So keep that in mind. And if you want to come visit us, we'll take you to the stone circles. You can hang out. We've been told through channeling that the best amount of time to be in the stone circles or around them is for about an hour and not more than that. And we'll take you and you can go and experience some healing. So the flagship ruang among all this has become known as Adam's Calendar, and it was rediscovered by Johann Heine, this guy standing there, in 2003, and it has now become the oldest working megalithic sun calendar on Earth, because it still works. You can still tell every day of the year where the shadow falls as the sun sets. You see the shadow there? It moves from the left edge across to the right edge, from the summer solstice to the winter solstice. That's 1 year, and then it moves back again. So it still works as a calendar. It's quite incredible. And Baba Credo Mutwa told me in 2008 when I met him for the first time that he was initiated at this place in 1937, and it is a well-known site by ancient African knowledge keepers as Inzalo Yelanga, or birthplace of the sun in Zulu. And this is where the African shamanic belief is, where humanity was created by the gods to be the slaves in the gold mines. Isn't that interesting? So this is what a 3D reconstructed Adam's Calendar looks like. I have to speed up. I think I've got half an hour left. So it's all the connections to Orion's belt and Horus and everything is there. And you can clearly see the pyramids in the distance there on the left. The pyramids are right smack bang in the middle of what's known as the Barberton Crater. Very rich in gold. When you draw a golden spiral starting at Adam's Calendar, it lands right between the pyramids. Now we can use a scientific argument for that. It's called probability, and that is the probability factor that the golden spiral should land right between the pyramids is several billion to 1. So it has to be by design and not by accident. So if you work in the metaphysical or the spiritual world, remember to use probability argument as a scientific argument, because these guys use it in the scientific labs all the time, so you can use it too. And it's a very sound argument if you learn how to use it. When you draw a line from Adam's Calendar exactly north, it'll take you right through Great Zimbabwe and eventually end up in the Great Pyramid of Giza. So clearly who built those 3 sites knew about the others, and was done by design, and the 31 degrees east longitudinal line was obviously a very important line in this construction process. What happened to the civilization? This we read, and in fact that picture tells 1,000 words when you read the following. This is one of the Sumerians' kings lists, and from these kings lists we get a lot of information. These numbers on this, I believe these are the numbers that actually inspired Eric Rankin to discover and develop his sonic geometry. And when you look at these numbers, you realize that these are sacred geometry numbers that are encoded into the Platonic plates. And the Platonic shapes. But what we read in the Sumerian kings list is, after kingship descended from heaven, or after the first kings were appointed by the gods, then all that stuff in the middle, and then the key thing, then the flood swept over. So it tells us about the flood, as in the biblical flood. And I believe it was the flood that caused the destruction of this whole vast giant machine in southern Africa, because the evidence is everywhere. Sand and soil covers huge areas, and you can see it from these photographs, right? But some of them have been reopened and reused. But I think this picture, as I mentioned, tells 1,000 words that a big flood came through there, and you'll see more evidence of that. Advanced tools and technology. So when I first arrived at this in Watervalboven, right in the heart of all these ancient ruins in the town that I live right now, I started to collect all these weird cone-shaped tools, mysterious tools. I don't know why I started to collect them. I just thought they were weird. Thank God I did, because that unraveled the missing link in all of ancient archaeology. The one smoking gun that all archaeologists and historians have been missing for all these years. Cone-shaped tools. You realize that cone-shaped tools are in all ancient civilizations, in Egypt and in Sumeria, in Australia, in Africa, in the Mayas, in England, right across Europe. Cone-shaped tools. And then along with them, in South Africa, in southern Africa, you find these Taurus stones, or these donut-shaped stones. And suddenly you find that you're sitting on the holy grail of ancient, advanced, and modern advanced technology. The Taurus stones and the cone-shaped tools, Taurus and cone combination. Unbelievable discovery that has just been right under our noses all these years. The Taurus stones emit very, very powerful energy fields. We started measuring this a long, long time ago already. By the way, our archaeologists in South Africa still refer to them as weights for digging sticks. That the people in the Stone Age made them with other stones, so they had weights to put around their sticks when they went foraging for food. That's what they still tell people. In fact, I just had a tour of 17 people from Germany and Europe and USA, and we went to Melville Koppies, just in the heart of Johannesburg, where there's some stone circles. And there they show these Taurus stones, and then the geologists, they started to tell us about these Taurus stones, how they made them. I actually couldn't believe that they still spread that disinformation. Anyway, we know now that these stones are very powerful toroid vortex field generators. A German scientist looked at some of these, and he said that they generate up to 3,400 decibels of sound. This is insane amount of power. So I can't say whether he was right or wrong, because this is what he told me, but this guy is a serious authority on what is referred to as hypersound, area of science that very few people are even aware of, when sound moves faster than the speed of light. And again, we're not going to talk about that now. It's for longer lectures. Also, when you start dealing with toroidal fields or vortex fields or torsion fields, it's all the same thing. So when people try and bamboozle you with these words, when you say toroidal field, vortex fields, torsion fields, it's all the same thing. So don't get confused by it. And when they say scalar energy, it's also the same thing, because toroidal fields are the scalar energy generators. And suddenly we have the holy grail, as I mentioned, of tapping into what some call the quantum field, the 0 point, what Nassim Haramein calls the vacuum. And here's an example of a Taurus stone we put in a bucket of water. Next morning we woke up and there were thousands of tiny bubbles spiraling around going into the center of it, clearly showing us that there's a strong energy. But and this, by the way, is, for those of you that don't know, this is the stone that I took to Nassim Haramein in Hawaii in 2013, and that stone there crashed the TSA security system at Doha International Airport in Qatar. And I was hauled off the plane, made to open my bag, and they inspected the stone with great confusion, and I went back on the plane. It was only 2 years later that I realized, when they made me take out that stone, I opened my bag, I took the stone out, and when I eventually went back on the plane, they never made me check the rest of the bag. The conclusion that I can reach is that they knew exactly what they were looking for, or they were told what to look for by whoever told them, open that bag, see what's in there, and they were obviously told, find a stone that looks like a donut. So when I showed them the donut, they were okay. They just wanted to check that they didn't want to make too much of a thing about it, because now we have Homeland Security, TSA security, that gives us very advanced scientific support and proof that we're dealing with ancient advanced technology. And this is a beautiful story. So just to show you how these torus stones work, these torus stones are not, they're not perfectly balanced toroidal fields. And this is what I was confused about for a long time. How does this work? Because toroidal fields are in nature are perfectly balanced. Well, these things are specifically made so they generate energy. And that's when everything becomes clear. This is why they use them. And again, the guys that were building the stone circles actually wore these torus stones like necklaces around their necks. They were much bigger than we were. But in past life regressions and channelings, this has come out many, many times. Again, I'm rushing to show you how these torus stones suck energy and push energy. This is a very quick demonstration.
Another example how the torus stones emit electromagnetic fields and powerful magnetic fields. Here is another torus stone that maxes out our measuring device in microtesla. Thank you. And now we demonstrate how the torus stones do push energy two ways. They push energy and they suck energy. And this is a very important discovery. This particular torus stone, in the way that it's lying, sucks energy. You can see the needle going in the opposite direction into the negative, as opposed to spiking and increasing. If you remove it, Chris, and let's see how the needle rises.
You see the needle going down?
Just move right away
from
it to show.
So that was just a quick demonstration. So and every torus stone is different. Just to show you how the temperature, thermal imaging cameras, if you hold it the one way, it gives you energy. If you turn it around, it sucks energy. That's it. Just 43 degrees, 45 degrees Celsius in the one, 25 degrees Celsius in the other, just by turning it around, right? And this is what happens if you hold it in your hand. How quickly, Thomas, look at his thyroid gland. Within 30 seconds, his thyroid heats up like crazy. 30 seconds. And if you turn it around, it drains you of energy. So my wife, Emma, has gone through the museum, and she doused all the stones so that we've got them lying the right way around, so they give us energy when you walk in there instead of sucking you dry. Because we've got about 20 of these in the museum now, and people walk into the museum and they literally feel like they walk into a wall of energy, and some people couldn't handle it. Even this last group that I had now, some of the people had to get out of the thing. So here's the cone and the torus combination. Even in the physics and scientific what do you call them, diagrams, you can see that the cone and torus is inextricably connected, right? Laser beam technology was only released to us in 2009. I'm running way over time here. So the cones obviously are the tips of the laser beam technology, and we have this technology built into our eyes. Obviously, we have rods and cones in our eyes, and the irises in our eyes are the toruses. The lens focuses the light and the sound. Light and sound are connected, right? And it goes through your lens into the back of your retina, which has got what? The cones in it. And once it hits the retina and the cone, it speeds up and turns into hypersound and goes through the optic nerve to your pineal gland. And this is why we should all be able to do that. And just to show you how advanced this technology really is, this is a guy called Henrik Holte who in 2017 won the Saab Award. It's a big deal award in the military, developing military technology. He developed the most powerful antenna ever that could both send and receive thousands of times stronger than any antenna before. Well, all it is a bunch of cones on a metal plate. And you start seeing how advanced this technology and how simple it is. So what is it all about? It's always all about the gold, obviously. Wherever there's stone circles, there are gold mines. Thousands of ancient gold mines have been discovered in southern Africa. Hundreds of tunnels discovered by people, over the last 100 years already. Mysterious tools and artifacts obviously reported. But in 2014, as recently as 2014 in South Africa, in a modern mine, the side of a tunnel like this caved away, and an ancient tunnel was discovered. What they do when this happens, they close that part of the mine down and no one is allowed back in there. In the 11th century, Ahmed al-Biruni describes the prosperous gold exports from the port of Sofala. Port of Sofala is on the eastern coast of southern Africa, where Mozambique is today. This is a 15th century map of Port of Sofala, and we're told that the gold was a month journey inland from the port of Sofala. And what happens when you go 1 month inland? You get to Great Zimbabwe. Great Zimbabwe ruins is the Monomotapa Kingdom, the Golden Kings, and that brings us to one of the greatest gold mysteries in recent times, and that's the story of Paul Kruger. On the 4th of June, 1900, a train filled with gold left Pretoria, and it was heading for the capital of Mozambique, Lorenzo Marx in those days. And it's guesstimated there was anything from 3 tons to 3,000 tons on the train. Notice it was a train filled with gold, not a carriage filled with gold. It was en route to past his little house in Waterval-Onder. This is his little house. By the way, this is while the South African War was going on from 1899 to 1902, when Paul Kruger was kicking the British Empire's butt and was winning at that stage. And anyway, by the time the train reached the town of Machadodorp, it disappeared and was never seen again. And this has become one of the greatest treasure hunt stories in the world. Treasure hunters come from all over the world every year. And one of the Veldponde, Paul Kruger's golden coins today, is worth about $90,000, just one. And this was a train filled with these. So you can imagine what that would be worth today. It's just insane. So we ask the wrong questions. We keep saying, where is the gold? The right question would be, where did Paul Kruger get all the gold from in 1900 to fill a whole train with? That's the correct question, because if we can answer that, we'll answer why the British Empire sent 470,000 troops to fight a bunch of farmers on horseback and a bunch of Zulus with spears, because they had to take control of southern Africa. This remains the British Empire's most expensive war until today, the South African War of 1899 to 1902. And I have no time for that. So let's go, because in 1900, the gold production was about 1 to 1.5 tons per annum. Where did Paul Kruger get all the gold from? And he's known to pay everyone in gold all the time. He always paid everyone in gold. Okay? It just so happens that the gold rush in South Africa started around 1964, and then a little town of Kaapsehoop, they found a big gold nugget, 5.2 kilograms. It was part of the whole gold rush. It's interesting that the gold rush in Australia, South Africa, and California all started more or less at the same time. That is not coincidental. And Kaapsehoop just happens to be where Adam's calendar is today, overlooking a giant ancient gold mine called the Barberton Crater. And also what is known as the modern Sheba gold mine, which remains the richest gold mine in the world today. What you find along the sides of the Barberton Crater are these piles of sand everywhere. It looks like an ancient gold mining facility, just like Johannesburg looks today. These are the mine dumps, as we call them, the mine dumps where they put the leftover sand after they process the gold. So the whole of Johannesburg is built on these yellow sand mine dumps everywhere. Sometimes they got grass growing on them, sometimes you don't recognize it, and some of them, now many of them are being reprocessed because they're still full of gold. They got better technology today. These are the mine dumps around Johannesburg, and this is the sand around Adam's calendar. You realize that we're dealing with ancient gold mining sites here. And I can tell you that these sites are all over the world. They're across the USA, they're across the whole world. The Anunnaki were mining the world on a scale that we can't imagine. We just keep thinking about mining in tiny, tiny little, no, the whole world was being mined on a scale that we can't imagine. Just like a scale of building that, 10 million structures together, that's unimaginable to us. Well, the gold mining was as big as that. It was just everywhere. And you start realizing this yellow sand, mountains of sand everywhere around the world. Evidence, yellow sand, evidence of ancient gold mining. No matter where you go. The Sumerian tablets tell us all about this. They talk about the Anunnaki and Enki and the Grand Architect and the gold mining and the work in the Abzu and where the gold came from, and it talks about how he created the primitive worker. Shall be created, our command will he understand, our tools he will handle, to the Anunnaki in the Abzu relief shall come. Notice he's holding a cone in his hand there in this little relief. Isn't that interesting? For many years I thought he's holding a cup. It's just a cup. No, it's a bloody cone. And then we read about Enki's mines and his technology. Talk about the earth splitter Enki established, with the earth a gash to make. Listen to this. By way of tunnels, the earth's innermost reach, the golden veins to uncover. Well, remember I showed you the magnetron shape, the flower shaped structures? Well, here is Enki sitting with a bunch of magnetrons around him. Again, in other lectures, longer lectures, I'll go into the detail of this and how the magnetrons, the cone-shaped tools, and the toroidal fields are all connected. And how when you take a ferrocell lens and you put it over a magnet, especially like a speaker magnet, you see what you see actually cones facing the center, right? And you start realizing the shapes of magnetic fields as well. So Adam's calendar is the birthplace of the sun, where humans were created to be the slaves in the gold mines. Anton Parks tells us that Adam actually means beast or animal or herd specimen, built as a slave, as a pure slave. If you haven't read Anton Parks, please do so. He takes Zechariah Sitchin to a whole nother level that'll just blow your mind. Here is the entrance to Sheba Gold Mine in South Africa in the 1800s. And it was this guy here called Paul Saker that confirmed to me that Sheba Gold Mine remains one of the wealthiest mines in the world in gold, because there are actually veins of gold oozing out of the walls, literally like thick jelly coming out of the walls. He was called there in the 80s as a consulting geologist in the mining industry to come and investigate this weird phenomenon. And they didn't know what was going on. They found this huge underground cavern. He calls it a cathedral. He says it's larger than the Vatican. And what they were puzzled by is that, first of all, who was mining there? And then there were these veins of gold oozing out, and some of them were empty. Some of them were mined out. So whoever was mining there had the technology to suck the gold out without blasting. And you know who that was. So where did Paul Kruger get all the gold from to pay everyone in gold? I believe he found one of these ancient Anunnaki tunnels that was filled with gold, right? Because they were used to dig tunnels to hide from the British, the Boer soldiers. Boer means farmer, by the way. And I believe they discovered one of these ancient Anunnaki tunnels, and that was filled with gold. And this is where Paul Kruger found all the gold to fill a whole train with. The poor guy probably thought this is some British stash, and he wanted to get it out of South Africa before the British found it. And the rest is history. But the British royalty knew all about it, because they know about the Anunnaki. They're the royal bloodlines. So since 2007, basically, I started collecting all these weird shapes, tools, and artifacts, and just weird shaped stones. Mysterious stone tools and artifacts that didn't make any sense to me, and I started collecting them and putting them in my museum, which has now got thousands of tools and artifacts in it. And I highly recommend you come and see it. It changes your life. And obviously the donut-shaped stones, as I showed you already, and these strong, strange, elongated stones, the stones that ring like bells. I'm not even going to play this for you because we're running out of time. Because I need to get to this point here, because nothing could have prepared me for the discovery of January 2018, when suddenly we realized that we're not walking on strange shaped stones, but actually that these stones are fossilized and petrified body parts of all kinds of creatures, including giants. These are not weird shaped stones. These are all fossilized body parts. There's even a humanoid shoe, a human foot, in some leather shoe. We have shoulder blades and ribs. And just to let you know that mud fossils have been used to extract DNA. This has been done. So I don't have to do it. I've got the physical forms and evidence in my museum. And once you start spotting what a fossil looks like, you realize this thing here. That's obviously not a stone. That's a bone where another bone was sticking out, or ligaments and tendons were attached, and your eyes start to open. You can see that central piece where the bone goes in and it sticks out the other side. But when you break these mud fossils, they don't have internal structure. You'd expect you don't see internal structure. What you see is something like this. It's black on the inside. It's complete metamorphosis, complete transformation, complete transmutation. That's how intense this petrification process is, because of what happens and how it happens. And this is the great new discovery. This is something that our geology schools do not teach, and they're not even aware of this. They might be aware of it, but they're certainly not teaching it. What you can see, there's a pattern. Can you see there's a pattern in there? Like, there's definitely a pattern in there. That pattern is indicative of that there was something embedded in there that is now completely transmutated. And this is the first fossil that I picked up. These ribs clearly shows you the beautiful ribs. And then this heart a few days later. You can see the aorta, the coronary artery. Here's another heart split in half. See the septum, the ventricles. Here the ribs that I was mentioning, just spectacular examples. Except the bottom rib, you can see this. Those are cut marks. Somebody was eating this rib. And that's when things get really more freaky and more bizarre. And here's a shoulder blade of a large creature. Bones, obviously that's a bone, and then a claw underneath. It's some sort of a claw. Here's a hoof of some creature that no longer exists. There's no creature alive today that has a hoof like that. And it's big. It's like this size. It's a huge animal. You can see the cut marks. Can you see the cut marks on it? Somebody cut off that bone that went into that hoof. This is not an accident. These things didn't break. They were cut. They were slaughtered and prepared for consumption. More bones in my museum on display. And these are reptilian body parts. Skin. Reptilian skin that used to be a piece of meat with the skin attached to it. There's a close-up of the reptilian skin. Here you can see the epithelial cells growing up into the skin. This is much larger reptilian skin. This is a rock about this size. Top of the mountain is too big for me to bring into the museum. And that's when we start finding the evidence of the giants and the giant creatures. Okay, look at the scales, from small scales to very large scales over there. And then this little crocodile tail. Can you see that crocodile tail in the rock there? In the rock, in the mud. So this tells us that the organic body part, together with the mud around it, turns into stone. The whole body turns into stone under certain conditions. Now I'm getting there. Some of these stones have little nipples on it like that, and the only animal that I could compare it is a hippo. Hippo looks just like that, so maybe we had hippo kind of animals there. And we have claws. Clearly you see these are beautiful examples of claws, and spikes, like on the back of a stegosaurus kind of dinosaur. And then teeth. These are all teeth of creatures, including humanoids. This is a human tooth. A humanoid tooth. It's this size. Okay? And then we have a jawbone, this part of the jaw, that comes right under your ear, except that is about the same size of a creature that would have it, or a humanoid that would have a tooth this size, and inside a tooth. Right? And then we have a fingertip. This is a fingertip of a creature about 50 times the size, this part of the finger. And this is fascinating, because I had this finger remote viewed when I was here in July by a guy called John Vivenko, who's a remote viewer here in the USA. So he took a picture of this and he sent it to his remote viewing team around the world, and he said, remote view the stone. And I think there were 12 people in his team. And guess what came back? All the remote viewers came back. This is a toe of a giant. One of them was unsure. It's either a finger or a toe, but it was all consensus is a toe of a giant. So now we have a giant. We have a tooth, a jawbone, and a fingertip of a giant that's more or less the same size. So, and that'll be 50 times the size of a human. So we now have some real physical evidence of giants. This is fascia, the biggest organ in the body, by the way, all the membranes that hold the muscles and other things inside the body together. So when you see stones like this, that's not precious stuff that, pressure things, that's what geology would say. No, these are fascia. fascia that under petrification conditions turn into crystalline, these beautiful crystalline structures inside the body. That's what you're looking at. This is what meat looks like, and when it petrifies, it looks like this, right? And then we have eggs. There's that's a ostrich egg, just to show you the size, and larger eggs, and even larger eggs, and larger eggs. See my foot there? And even larger eggs. And then it gets freaky, and we have chopped up body parts. It's like a leg of beef or leg of pork or who knows. And when you put them all together, there they are on display in the museum, you start realizing that somebody was busy chopping up and cutting up animals and preparing the body parts to hang up in a butcher, just like we have today. Pieces of meat hanging up in a butcher. And we find we are okay with that, those of us that eat meat. And that's what they were doing here. Who knows how long ago this was going on. And, you know, there you can see, that's what it looks like on the left. When it turns to stone, as it looks like on the right. And there's a chicken leg. It's obviously a chicken leg. When I picked it up, I didn't think it was a chicken leg. I picked it up because I was still thinking, why is this stone this weird shape? You see, I was still suffering from cognitive dissonance. Once I was blind, now I can see. And it's an amazing process that people go through when they come on my journeys and the tours. Once they go through the museum and their eyes get sensitized to this, and we go up the mountain, people go crazy, right? And you would think that this is just a stone. No, that's not a stone. That's a piece of steak that's just petrified. And you start seeing things very, very differently, you know? And this is just to show you the walls of mud, the mud deposited there, showing evidence of a flood. And on top of it, and sometimes still inside it, you see these fossils. When I talk about mountains of fossils, I'm not kidding. I'm talking about fossils sliding down the mountain everywhere. This was a huge extinction event that happened here. There are body parts scattered all over southern Africa. You have never seen anything like this or imagined anything like this. How does petrification happen? I'm supposed to finish now. But how does petrification happen? This is what none of us are aware of, what I certainly wasn't aware of. It's called instant fossilization or instant petrification. There's a guy called Peter Mungo Jupp that's been on this. He's an Australian researcher and a scientist, has been on this for many, many years. You can watch his research online as well. This is an example in Alberta, Canada. There's a tree stump that was struck by a high-powered electrical line and within a few hours turned to stone. Petrification and fossilization happens instantaneously. Evidence is all around us. These are some university results. Fossilization process was probably taking just a few hours. Okay? So these results and this research is available, but we're not aware of this. Right? Science. Surprise! Fossils in a flash. Flash of lightning. That's all we need. We need a flood. What you saw, these fossils that I'm sharing with you, these are known as mud fossils, right? And this is what it looks like. They're literally sliding down the mountain. You need mud, like a giant flood, Noah's flood, all these body parts and creatures and chopped up body parts that were being ready for hanging in butcheries or whatever, ancient Stone Age butcheries, Flintstones butcheries. And the flood came, got trapped everything in the mud. And then all you need is one extra ingredient, lightning. Ka-chung! And let me tell you, we live in a place where lightning strikes all the time, right? We have several thousand lightning strikes every season, or hundreds of thousands. And just to carry on, here claw marks in flesh. You can see the claw marks there. There's more claw marks in other pieces that I've been collecting. Here's a beautiful example of 2 claw marks. And then little nibbling, you can see the creature was nibbling at the bone marrow there. Now it's just a piece of rock. If it breaks, you will not see this detail on the inside. It'll just be black, dense. And here is, for years and years, I couldn't understand why was this weird shape in the stone. Now I know, because this is not a stone. That used to be a piece of meat. You can see some animal with the claws was just taking a chunk of meat out of this rock, and then it turned to stone. So now it all starts to make sense. Here's what is that, a bullet hole? Is it a spike wound? And you can see the reptilian scales around the entry wound. This is basically a steak, like a dino steak, right? And you can see claw marks, more claw marks. I'm going to finish here in 3 minutes. You can see the giant teeth going in there from the bottom. That's a big rock. That rock is this size. More claw marks on another rock. This is all along Adam's calendar. Look at these 2 teeth marks going in there. Find it fascinating. These are 2, always 2. Not 3 or 4 or 1, 2. Always 2, whether they're small or large. It's weird. And what is this? Does that look like a crocodile head to you? It does to me. Well, that's probably because it's a crocodile. Okay, so stop looking at rocks and going, oh, it's just a weird-shaped rock. No, it's a weird-shaped rock because it used to be something else. It's no longer something else. It's now turned to stone. So start seeing things and feeling things. I just watched a Bruce Lipton thing, a video recently, and suddenly Bruce Lipton is talking about the stuff that I've been talking about for many years, and that's about sound and resonance, which is interesting, and how he's advising people how to feel, how to start feeling, and to teach our children to feel things and not listen to what we're told. Actually feel, use the resonance. So feel these things. Does that look like a lizard head to you? Yes, it does to me. And just more giant body parts. There's a big bone knuckle. There's my foot next to it, just to show you. And just to show you that big bones are found in mainstream research in archaeology. Here's David Attenborough lying next to a big bone, right? They can't, because he's a big name, they can't hide it. So they show it, but then they just quickly get rid of that information. Well, here's a big bone close to Adam's calendar. That's a giant chicken bone. The problem is that this chicken bone is now a dolerite rock. And that's the thing that our geologists can't wrap their heads around. There's another very huge rock. You can see where it was chopped off. That's a shaft coming out of it. And this is part of an intestine of a giant. This is another angle of it. And then these phallus stones. These guys were all over the place. Phallus stones, phallus stones, phallus stones. That's, I believe, could be a real phallus, a real fossilized phallus. And unfortunately, the fossils scrambled the entire timeline, because what I have just realized recently is the walls of the stone circles, all the ones that I've been researching for 12 years now, all the walls are constructed with fossilized body parts. That is the twist in the tale. And we remember that when the gods were on earth, there were giants. Leviticus tells us that we were like locusts by their sides, and they were up to basically a mile tall. We've got evidence of giants. This is one of the best examples of a giant footprint that we go to. This is probably a real fossilized penis of a giant. I don't think it's somebody went and carved this. Now that we know we're dealing with fossils of giants, then this should be a fossil too. And this stuff is just getting more and more interesting. And then obviously this is a giant footprint up against the rocky outcrop, and this thing on the left has been placed there right on its tip. And I believe this is a heart of a giant about 300 meters tall or 900 feet. You can see where the aorta would have gone into that heart. And even Adam's calendar, all the stones and rocks of Adam's calendar are actually just fossils. And what we called our little sphinx until recently is now nothing more than just a giant bone of a giant dinosaur-like creature or a giant. That's why it's such a weird shape. Nobody sculptured it or sculpted it or shaped it into that. It was that shape. And the more we know, the more we learn, the less we know. Things are just getting stranger and stranger, and the timelines are getting scrambled. So I'm going to finish here by asking you to please go online, join my video channel, because I need all the support I can get. And you'll get 20 minutes every week. It's like a channel where you get a new 20-minute episode every week of all this research and discovery. If you can afford $11 for the price of 3 cups of coffee per month, you can have Michael Tillinger's video channel. You can... And 3 final slides. If you can still sneak into the shaman journey, this is going to be an awesome journey from the 25th of October. If you can join us at this late stage, we still have a few places open for this. This is the first shamanic journey we're doing with my shaman friend from Australia, John Paul Eagleheart. What a special individual. You'll love him when you meet him. And then the next research expedition, where we go and basically just go and research and find and discover. And we spend much time as we need in one place. It's not a tourism thing. We just decide today we're going to go here and go and explore and see what we find. This is a real thrilling adventure. Join me for the next research expedition, 18 November to 1st of December. And then in February next year, I'm doing another what we call Sacred Journey to Africa with the incredible Sam Osmanagic from Bosnian Pyramid fame. Sam is an incredible individual, and if you'd like to meet Sam, join us on that journey. We're going to go to Great Zimbabwe, all the stone circles and ruins around us, and the giant footprint, and all these places we've just seen here. So thank you for listening. I hope this has given you a slightly different perspective of what's going on in the world. We're just scratching the surface here, people. And the good thing is that we know what to do with this information. Thank you very much for being here. Yes.